My name is Gracie Hale, and I'm 27 years old. I still remember the exact moment I realized my own parents had been making phone calls behind my back, calls that were quietly, methodically destroying every chance I had at a future. I was sitting in my car outside a glass office building, hands on the steering wheel, replaying the interview that had just ended in under 4 minutes. 4 minutes. The hiring manager had barely looked at me before sliding my resume back across the desk and saying, "We've already received some concerning information about your application." He wouldn't tell me what. He never told me what. None of them ever did. That was interview number 31. I had graduated with a business administration degree from a real, accredited university. I had a 3.7 GPA. I had 2 internships, a letter of recommendation from a professor who called me one of the sharpest students he'd taught in 15 years, and a genuine passion for corporate operations and logistics. On paper, I was a strong candidate. In reality, I was walking into every interview already blacklisted. I just didn't know it yet. My parents, my father Raymond and my mother Dolores, had never approved of the path I chose. They wanted me closer to home, working at the family dry cleaning business, staying small, staying manageable. When I left for college 4 states away at 18, my father looked at me at the door and said, "You're going to fail and come crawling back." He didn't say it with sadness. He said it like a man who intended to make sure of it. I didn't understand that then. I thought it was just bitterness. I thought I could prove him wrong by succeeding. What I didn't know was that proving him wrong was something he had already decided to prevent. By the time I hit interview number 40, I was starting to fracture. I was sending out 20-30 applications a week. I was tailoring every cover letter. I was practicing answers in the mirror at 6 in the morning, wearing my one good blazer, running through every possible question a hiring manager might throw at me. And then I would sit across from someone who had already made up their mind before I opened my mouth, and I would watch their expression close like a door, and I would drive home and sit in a parking lot for an hour before I could make myself go inside. My roommate at the time, a woman named Petra, kept telling me something was wrong with the pattern. "It's not normal," she said one night. "Nobody gets rejected this consistently. You're good at interviews, Gracie. I've watched you practice. Something else is happening." I appreciated her saying it, but I didn't have any proof. I just thought maybe I was cursed. Maybe my father was right. Maybe I genuinely wasn't built for the world I was trying to enter. Then came interview number 58. A mid-sized logistics company. The interviewer was a kind woman named Sandra who called me back personally after the rejection to say she was sorry, that she had actually liked me a lot, but that they'd received a voicemail from someone identifying themselves as a former supervisor of mine who had serious concerns about the authenticity of my credentials. She said she probably shouldn't be telling me this, but she could hear in my voice that something wasn't adding up, and she felt it wasn't right to stay quiet. I drove home shaking. A former supervisor. I had 2 internships. Both supervisors had given me glowing references. I called them both that same night. Neither had made any calls. Neither had left any voicemails. The voice Sandra had described, an older man, deliberate in his speech, with a very specific way of pausing between sentences, was not either of my former supervisors. It was my father. It took me another 3 months and a conversation with a cousin I barely knew to confirm what I was already starting to believe. My cousin had overheard a phone call my father made to a company where I had applied. She said he introduced himself as a reference contact and told them, calmly and in detail, that my degree was purchased, that I had fabricated my internship hours, and that I had a history of dishonesty in professional settings. She said my mother was sitting right there while he made the call. Neither of them looked troubled by it. 92 interviews. 2 years of my life. And the entire time, the 2 people who were supposed to want the best for me were on the phone, one step ahead, making sure I never got there. I want you to understand something before I continue. I am not telling you this story because I am still broken by it. I am telling you this story because of what happened next. Because of the CEO. Because of the recording. Because of what justice actually looks like when it finally arrives. I walked into interview number 93 on a Tuesday morning in November, with nothing left to lose. I had stopped feeling nervous about interviews somewhere around number 70. By that point, the rejection wasn't the painful part anymore. The painful part was the silence afterward, the not knowing, the The feeling that I was fighting an invisible wall with my bare hands and no one could see it but me. The company was called Meridian Supply Group. Mid-sized, well-respected, with a regional headquarters about 40 minutes from where I was living. The position was an operations coordinator role, exactly the kind of work I had trained for, exactly the kind of environment where I knew I could contribute something real. I almost didn't apply. I almost let that Tuesday morning pass like every other Tuesday morning for 2 years, with a cup of cold coffee and another rejection sitting in my inbox. But Petra pushed me. She printed the job listing and left it on the kitchen counter with a sticky note that just said, "One more." So I went. The CEO, a man named Gerald Ashford, was conducting interviews personally that week because his HR director had just gone on medical leave. He was in his early 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of quiet steadiness that tells you immediately a person has seen a great deal and cannot easily be rattled. He shook my hand, gestured to the chair across from him, and said, "Tell me something about yourself that isn't on this resume." It was the first time in 2 years an interviewer had asked me that. I talked for almost 4 minutes without stopping. I told him about the logistics systems I had redesigned during my second internship. I told him about the supply chain project I had built independently during the months I was unemployed, just to keep my skills sharp, just to prove to myself I still had them. I watched his expression the entire time. He was listening. Actually listening. Not waiting for a reason to end the conversation. Listening. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and something shifted in his face. Not alarm exactly, but recognition. He held up one finger toward me and said, "I need to take this." "I apologize." He put it on speaker without thinking, or maybe without realizing what was about to happen in front of a witness. The voice on the other end was my father's. I recognized it within 2 words. That deliberate pause. That careful, measured tone he used when he wanted to sound credible. He introduced himself as a former professional contact of mine and began his script. The fake degree, the fabricated hours, the dishonesty. The same performance he had given 92 times before to 92 different rooms I was never in. Gerald Ashford did not say a word. He reached across his desk slowly, and I saw it, a small digital recorder already running. He had a policy, he told me later, of recording all calls received during active hiring periods for legal documentation purposes. He let my father finish. Then he said, very calmly, "Thank you for the information," and ended the call. He looked at me across the desk for a long moment. "How many times," he said, "has someone called before your interviews?" I told him. All of it. The 2 years. The 92 rejections. Sandra's phone call. My cousin's confession. The voice that had followed me from city to city, company to company, quietly closing every door before I could reach it. He picked up his phone again and called his legal team while I was still sitting there. What followed took several months and involved attorneys, a formal investigation, and documentation pulled from phone records that confirmed my father had made contact with dozens of companies on my application list. There were consequences, real, legal, lasting consequences, that I will not detail here because they are still partially ongoing. But I will tell you this, Gerald Ashford offered me the position that same afternoon. I have been with Meridian Supply Group for 14 months. I was promoted after 9. My father called me once after everything came out. I let it ring. Some doors, when they finally open, you walk through and you don't look back. If this story moved you, subscribe to Core Revenge Tales right now and hit that notification bell. Every story on this channel is real, raw, and worth every second.